The world can change in months, in weeks, sometimes even in hours. But there are rare moments when the tide turns in a single day. That day has just passed, and the tremors it set off are already reshaping the future of the global economy. For decades, the United States stood at the center of the financial universe, its dollar the unquestioned language of trade, its policies rippling outward as law. But within 24 hours, events unfolded that revealed just how fragile that dominance has become. The first signs came through growing friction with the BRICS alliance. Nations once seen as challengers on the periphery, now emerging as an alternate center of gravity. India, long thought to be America's quiet ally within BRICS, is no longer so firmly in Washington's orbit. The possibility of New Delhi joining the broader effort to step away from the US dollar is no longer speculation, it is suddenly real. At the same time, the very foundation of modern life, the semiconductor industry, was caught in the crossfire. Microchips, those invisible engines powering our phones, our cars, and our defense systems, became the stage for a power struggle that goes far beyond technology. Control over these tiny circuits has become a symbol of something larger, control over the future itself. And on this front, America's grip is slipping. But perhaps the most startling twist came from the unlikeliest place, Japan. For generations, Tokyo stood as Washington's most loyal partner, a trusted ally whose choices seemed to move in tandem with America's. Yet now, Japan is quietly breaking away from that script. It has forged new ties with India, deepened collaboration with Brazil, and refused to turn its back on China despite mounting pressure. Even its central bank has begun to question the safety of U.S. treasuries, hinting at a deeper doubt about America's ability to anchor the global financial system. None of these moves alone would have shaken the world, but happening together in such a short span of time, they mark the arrival of something undeniable, a turning point. What once looked like small cracks in the U.S.-led order now appear as widening fault lines. The alliances, currencies, and industries that once revolved around Washington are shifting toward new centers of power. History does not always announce its transformations with fanfare. Sometimes it begins quietly, in unexpected trade deals, in whispered banking strategies, in the steady strengthening of bonds outside the old order. Yet the meaning is clear. The age of unquestioned American dominance is fading. A new global story is being written, and for the first time in generations, Washington may no longer hold the pen. For most of the modern era, the United States has stood at the center of the global stage, dictating the rhythms of finance, energy, and power. Its allies moved in step, its rivals reacted, and its dollar served as the backbone of trade. But the world does not stand still forever. What was once unquestioned is now under review, and what was once permanent is suddenly fragile. The signals of change are no longer whispers on the edges of geopolitics. They are loud, undeniable shifts that even Washington cannot afford to ignore. The clearest alarm has come from a place that once symbolized absolute loyalty, Japan. For decades, Tokyo has been America's most dependable partner in Asia, a cornerstone of its strategic vision, and a reliable amplifier of U.S. interests in the region. Yet today, Japan is slowly but unmistakably drifting from Washington's orbit. New trade deals with India, deeper energy ties with Brazil, and continued engagement with China all signal that Tokyo is no longer content to play the role of faithful follower. The message is subtle but sharp. America's allies are learning to stand on their own feet, and Washington's influence, even over its closest partners, is beginning to fade. This is not just about Japan. It is about a broader shift taking place across the globe. America has chosen a confrontational economic strategy, hoping to corner rivals through sanctions, tariffs, and restrictions. But the world is not standing still in response. Instead, new alliances are forming, old supply routes are being redrawn, and alternative systems are being built. Allies are diversifying their options, rivals are strengthening their positions. And while Washington clings to its old playbook, much of the world is quietly writing new rules for a different era. Nowhere is this transformation clearer than in the realm of energy, the bloodstream of modern civilization. When Washington and its European allies unleashed sanctions on Russia, the goal was simple: isolate Moscow, cut off its revenues, and weaken its global influence. But instead of collapsing, Russia adjusted. It turned east, toward China, and found a partner ready not just to buy, but to bind itself more tightly to Moscow's fortunes. What emerged was not a desperate workaround, but a massive restructuring of Eurasia's energy flows. At the heart of this shift are two colossal engineering feats, the power of Siberia pipelines. The first is already operational, carrying billions of cubic meters of Russian natural gas across vast distances straight into Chinese territory. The second, now under construction, promises to double that flow. Together, they represent more than just infrastructure. They are lifelines of a new order, steel arteries pumping energy from the frozen fields of Siberia into the industrial heart of China. Once, Russia's energy flowed west into Europe. Now it is being rerouted east, and Beijing is welcoming every drop. The consequences are profound. By turning away from Europe, Russia has transformed China into its most vital customer. And because Western sanctions limit Moscow's options, Beijing is buying oil and gas at heavily discounted prices. For China, this is a masterstroke. At a time when energy costs are spiking across the globe, it has secured a steady supply of cheap fuel for years to come. That energy powers Chinese factories, lights its megacities, drives its green technology push, and even underwrites its expanding military capacity. For Russia, sanctions have become a chain forcing it into Beijing's embrace. For China, they have become a gift, an economic advantage locked in for the future. Meanwhile, American households are feeling the opposite effect. Prices at the pump are higher. Energy costs ripple into food, goods, and services. Families pay more, even as Washington's leverage abroad shrinks. Every barrel of oil diverted eastward is one less tool for America to wield in shaping global markets. Every shipment of gas that fuels Chinese production strengthens an economy that is increasingly positioned as America's chief rival. The irony is stark. Sanctions designed to weaken Russia have instead accelerated China's rise. This is why the stakes are so high. The struggle is no longer just about trade or tariffs. It is an energy war, and America is losing ground. Energy is not just fuel, it is power. It determines whose factories run, whose militaries move, whose economies grow. By locking itself into confrontation while others lock in long-term energy deals, the U.S. risks finding itself isolated in the very system it once dominated. The quiet earthquake beneath America's feet. Great powers rarely collapse with a bang. More often they erode quietly, one decision at a time, one strained alliance at a time, until the world looks up and realizes the balance has shifted. Right now, Washington is sleepwalking towards such a moment. And the trigger may not be warplanes or sanctions, but something far more unexpected: medicine, diamonds, and the world's most overlooked alliance. For decades, the United States has relied on India to fill the shelves of its pharmacies, stock its hospitals, and sustain its healthcare system. From cancer drugs to insulin, India produces over 20% of the generic medicines consumed in America. These aren't luxury items, they are lifelines. Yet in the name of tariffs and politics, Washington is gambling with the very supply chain that keeps millions of Americans alive. The uncomfortable truth is this: America lacks the ability to replace India's pharmaceutical might. Domestic factories cannot be built overnight. Costs at home would skyrocket, and patients would pay the price. A rupture in U.S.-India pharmaceutical trade wouldn't just cause shortages, it would ignite a full-blown healthcare emergency. Imagine pharmacies turning patients away, hospitals rationing chemotherapy, diabetics struggling to afford insulin. That is not abstract policy. It is a real human crisis waiting to unfold. But medicine is only the beginning. Trump's aggressive tariff plans stretch into diamonds, textiles, machinery, and technology services, sectors where India is deeply embedded in the global economy. Consider diamonds. America imports $24 billion worth of polished stones each year, most of them cut and refined in India. A 75% tariff would shatter that pipeline. Yet, this is where Washington's logic falters. India doesn't need the United States as desperately as the United States needs India. Beijing and Hong Kong are ready to snap up the trade. Every diamond bypassing New York and landing in Shanghai strengthens China's grip and chips away at American dominance. The deeper irony is that this tariff war is misdirected. India is not a rival. It was meant to be Washington's strongest partner in Asia, a democratic counterbalance to China's growing influence. But by treating it like an adversary, America risks handing New Delhi to Beijing and Moscow on a silver platter. What was meant to fracture BRICS could instead forge it into steel, and the stakes are higher than most realize. Not long ago, India stood with Washington on one of the most important global questions, the role of the US dollar. Within BRICS, when Russia and China pushed for alternatives, India resisted. It kept faith in the dollar as the world's reserve currency. That loyalty anchored America's financial influence, but loyalty is fragile. Push hard enough with tariffs, and India could swing to the other side, joining efforts to dethrone the dollar. Picture the fallout. Oil no longer priced in dollars, but in yuan, rubles, or a BRICS-backed basket. Global trade flowing eastward, bypassing Wall Street. America's greatest source of power, the dominance of its currency, slipping away. This is the true cost of a miscalculated tariff. Not just higher prices at home, but the erosion of the very system that has kept America at the center of global power since World War II. What makes this moment so dangerous is its subtlety. It doesn't look like a world war. It doesn't feel like a financial collapse. It looks like small policy shifts, tariffs here, sanctions there. But together, they are forming the architecture of a new order, one where BRICS nations weave tighter trade networks, where China gains leverage through energy, where Russia finds new markets, and where India, once the bridge to America, chooses independence. For most of the modern era, the United States stood as the unquestioned architect of global trade, finance, and technology. Washington built the arteries through which the world's economy flowed. The dollar, the swift banking system, the vast semiconductor supply chains, and the multinational corporations that shaped daily life everywhere. America was not just a participant in this order, it was the referee, the enforcer, and the ultimate beneficiary. But history has its own rhythm, and empires rarely notice when the ground begins to shift beneath their feet. Today, those shifts are no longer subtle tremors. They are earthquakes, and the epicenter lies far from Washington. China has been quietly preparing for this moment. For years, Beijing studied the vulnerabilities exposed by America's reliance on financial dominance. The dollar-based SWIFT system gave Washington the ability to punish rivals with economic exile, cutting them off from the flow of global money. But rather than complain, China built a lifeboat, the CIPS payment network. At first, it seemed minor, a footnote in the vast machinery of finance. Yet the truth is more profound. CIPS represents China's contingency plan, its insurance policy, and, increasingly, its vision for a world no longer held hostage by Washington's rules. If America tries to lock China out, Beijing will not beg for re-entry. It will simply walk into its own system, taking allies, partners, and perhaps entire continents with it. But the battle goes deeper than financial plumbing. At the heart of this struggle is silicon, the tiny microchips that are the invisible brain of modern civilization. Everything from smartphones and laptops to power grids, satellites, and fighter jets depends on them. Whoever commands the semiconductor industry does not merely control a market. They hold sway over the future itself. Trump understood this, which is why he staked so much on bringing the crown jewels of chip-making back to American soil. His approach was blunt and forceful. Lure giants like TSMC and Samsung into building plants in the United States, while imposing crushing tariffs on chips made abroad. In theory, it was industrial rebirth. In practice, it has been a showcase of America's limitations. The Arizona project, led by TSMC, hailed as proof of American revival, is drowning in delays, spiraling costs, and a shortage of workers trained to operate advanced facilities. Samsung's Texas expansion faces similar obstacles. The brutal truth is that decades of outsourcing left the United States hollowed out, unable to replicate the efficient ecosystems that Asia built over generations. Supply chains that stretch seamlessly from South Korea to Taiwan to Singapore cannot simply be uprooted and replanted in the American desert. What Trump's tariffs revealed was not strength, but fragility. America can fund factories, but it cannot conjure the discipline, infrastructure, or industrial culture that Asia perfected. Meanwhile, Beijing has turned every sanction into a spark. Where Washington saw punishment, China saw motivation. Billions of dollars have poured into research, acquisitions, and state-backed innovation. Universities and research parks are overflowing with engineers whose mission is clear: Break free of Western dependence. Progress has been rapid, shocking even seasoned analysts. SMIC, once considered years behind, has already produced 5-nanometer chips, a technological threshold that many believed unreachable without American tools. Each chip produced in China is more than a piece of hardware. It is a declaration of independence. It is proof that pressure is not weakening China, but hardening it. The longer this continues, the clearer the trajectory becomes. In a decade, China may not only catch up to the United States, but surpass it in key domains: artificial intelligence, quantum computing, advanced military systems, and renewable energy grids. Instead of hobbling Beijing, tariffs and sanctions are driving its transformation into a nation that cannot be coerced, cannot be excluded, and cannot be slowed. Washington wanted to guard its technological throne, but in doing so, it may have ignited the very revolution that topples it. What we are witnessing is more than a trade war. It is the great decoupling, the slow but deliberate unraveling of a relationship that once defined globalization itself. America builds walls, hoping to protect its markets and secure its industries. China builds bridges, weaving together its own payment systems, its own energy pipelines, its own technological ecosystem. Each sanction widens the divide, each tariff deepens the separation, and with every step, the world itself is being pulled into two distinct orbits, one under Washington's fading command and another rising within Beijing's gravitational pull. The implications are not abstract. They will determine the price of food in supermarkets, the cost of medicine in hospitals, the accessibility of technology, and the very stability of currencies. They will shape whether the next generation lives under a global order dominated by one nation or divided between rival systems that compete not just for influence, but for the soul of the future. America's gamble is that by forcing confrontation, it can preserve control. But what if the gamble backfires? What if, instead of bending the world back under its will, Washington has accelerated the birth of a parallel order that no longer needs it? This is the paradox history will remember. By trying to contain China, America may have given it the greatest gift of all, the urgency to be independent. And once a nation learns to survive without you, it no longer has any reason to return. What emerges is not just a rival, but a rival with its own world, its own rules, and its own destiny. For the first time in a century, America faces the possibility of being not the writer of history, but a character forced to live inside it.